Today marks 500 days since Hamas terrorists attacked Israel and took more than 250 hostages into Gaza. 73 hostages are still being held captive, and 14 of them are set to be released in phase one of the ceasefire deal, leaving families desperate for answers. Moshe Lavi, whose brother-in-law is still being held captive by Hamas, joins me now. And thank you so much for being here on this somber mile marker of 500 days. With that timeline in mind, do you feel closer than ever before or further away from getting your brother-in-law home?
Thank you for having me this morning. As you mentioned, it's a difficult day for us. We're tired as families of these milestones. I did not think we'll reach such a terrible milestone. We are cautiously optimistic that we can still see Omri home soon. But we also know that we're dealing with a terrorist organization that is going to put hurdles for the second phase of the deal, in which Omri is supposed to be included. I'm encouraged by President Trump, his leadership, his team. Only this weekend, they echoed the sentiments that they want to see all the hostages home, and that's what they're going to work for. And I hope they'll push all stakeholders, including the Israeli government and the mediator countries like Qatar, to understand this deal needs to be done.
Well, it appears that that's exactly what's happening right now. And like I said, 14 Israeli hostages are still supposed to be set free in phase one. I mean, dealing with these phases must be such a challenge to think of who gets let out first and who has to stay behind. And unfortunately, your brother-in-law was not on that list of phase one, which leaves phase two of the deal. And Steve Witkoff, President Trump's special envoy to the Middle East, said this about phase two, that it will happen yesterday. Watch this.
Phase two is a little bit more complicated than phase one, but phase two is absolutely going to begin. I've actually had calls this morning, I can tell you, with Prime Minister Netanyahu, with Prime Minister Mohammed from Qatar, and as well with Director Hassan from Egypt, who is their Director of Intelligence. And we had very, very productive and constructive calls this morning about the sequencing of phase two.
And Moshe, he went on to say that phase two is more complicated because it contemplates an end to the war and also removing Hamas from Gaza, which I guess could go back to the question of so close yet so far. How do you feel about that?
I'm trying not to deal directly with the policy decisions. It's not my role as a family member. When I go to Washington, I was there last week and I'm flying again tonight, and speak to elected officials. I emphasize the human story from Omri and why it's urgent. Every hostage is a humanitarian situation right now. We saw the footage from hostages to return. All of them do not look well. Some of them look in terrible condition of starvation, deprivation of sunlight, water, torture. We know some of them are chained right now. As I speak, my brother-in-law is chained, is being tortured by terrorists. And so I try and make sure they understand they can save his life, they can bring him home to my sister Lishai and my nieces Ronnie and Alma. There are so many complicated issues on the table. I trust the policymakers understand it. In our Israeli society, we have an ethos of redeeming the captives. It's an Israeli and Jewish ethos, and I think it binds us as a society, as a nation, as a culture, and there is a social contract we have to uphold. I hope my government will continue to do everything it can to bring them home, and I trust the administration.
You know, you bring up such a good point. We get so wrapped up in the policy conversation of all of this, but there's a human element that needs to be focused on and emphasized, and your family recently received proof of life from another hostage that was released who spent time in captivity with your brother-in-law. What did you learn there?
We learned that the proof of life is of July, so it's not that recent, sadly. We learned that Omri is very strong, is giving strength to others. He's a shiatsu therapist in his training, a very resilient man, and he was giving some therapy sessions to other hostages in captivity, trying to give them from his strength. This is the person he is. He has a kind heart, gentle soul, and a strong spirit. And we learned that, we understand that we can still bring him home. We have no reason to believe he's no longer alive until we're told otherwise. So we advocate for him. That's why I'm going to speak this week in CPAC to elected officials, to leaders of the conservative movement in the US, to make sure that they learn about Omri, to learn about what an incredible father he is.
Well, you are a wonderful brother and an incredible brother-in-law. To be devoting this past 500 days to getting him back. Final question to you: would it be okay for you to think about him being released from Gaza, to hope for that, and the first thing that you would do as a family together?
We have to imagine every day that Omri is coming back home. We have to dream of that moment. We have to picture it. And that makes us powerful enough when we speak with others, with communities. When we wake up in the morning, I have no doubt he's coming back, and I have no doubt I'm going to see Roni and Alma, my little nieces, run to him, hug him, and take him home.
We are praying for that as well. Moshe Lavi, thank you so much for joining us.